Thank you for joining the August 2017 edition of the Sustainable Materials Management Web Academy. We are happy to have you participating. Today's webinar will feature an overview of the practical application of the newly published Guide to Conducting Student Food Waste Audits, a resource for schools. This 90-minute webinar is hosted by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to provide training and a networking opportunity to tribal, state, and local governments, non-governmental organizations, and other stakeholders interested in sustainable materials management. In this webinar, you will hear from Melissa Terry, a principal contributor to the guide from the University of Arkansas. You'll also learn from Lori De La Cruz, the Sustainability Coordinator at Mountain View College in Dallas, Texas, and Esau Millenthal, who is the former executive chef for the Hutto Independent School District in Hutto, Texas. And you'll hear about their experience with implementing the concepts and tips presented in this new guide. We will take one or two burning questions after each presentation, and we'll have a longer question and answer session at the conclusion of all 4 presentations. Please feel free to type questions throughout the webinar. Moving into today's webinar, please note the disclaimer. And now we're going to go to our speakers. First, I have the pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Lori De La Cruz. Lori De La Cruz is a Sustainability Coordinator at Mountain View College in Dallas, Texas. She has specialized in sustainability and solid waste reduction education, project planning, and implementation for more than 20 years. She is responsible for managing Mountain View College's climate and sustainability action plans and reports. And we just found out she just loves her job. Lori, I now turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. We are lucky enough here at Mountain View College to have the opportunity to focus on food quite a bit in our curriculum. When I came on board, we were looking for a way to introduce sustainability to our students, and we discovered that food was the perfect vehicle for doing that. So if you'll forward to the next slide. So what does food have to do with it? Food has everything to do with sustainability, especially when you're trying to explain that to students. Forward the next one. So what we do is we go into the classroom and we talk about the 3 legs of the sustainability stool so the students understand that there's more to the food discussion than just the environmental aspects. There's also an economic aspect and a societal aspect, and that they all have to work in tandem. If one of those legs is shorter than the other, you've got a wonky stool and things aren't equitable. So we talk about how to improve the situation to make it equitable. Next slide. So we break it down into 5 areas. We do a mind map on the whiteboard, and we label it with energy, land, water, chemicals, and waste. So we start to show about how all of these things are connected. So with the energy, what kind of energy goes into growing food? We talk about the solar energy, but then we start talking about the mechanization of food production and the fuel that goes into that mechanization, and then we talk about the extraction of that fuel and how it's processed, and then we talk about the emissions. So we're looking both upstream and downstream, so the students can have a better concept of all of the implications of the food process. And of course, we talk about the transportation to the processors, and then to the supermarket, and then when you drive to the supermarket to buy your food, and then you drive it home, all of that has emissions impacts. And then we talk about the land and the soil degradation, that comes from monoculture and how that leads to a loss of biodiversity, and then all of the emissions that came from the energy aspect, how that comes down and as rain on the soil and in the water. And then we talk about the water. And of course, we all know that only 1% of the world's water is drinkable, and that's what we use for irrigation. A lot of our farmland is in the Midwest. They are pumping the Ogallala aquifer. It is very, very depleted, which is leading to subsidence. That's also a problem in California with all the farmland in California. And then we can talk about climate change and extreme drought and weather extremes and flooding and how that affects the food process. And then we talk about the chemicals and how we use mostly synthetic fertilizers. What are the synthetic fertilizers made of? They're made of petroleum-based products. It also leads to soil destruction. When you're using synthetics, it kills the beneficial bugs in the soil. So you go to the next slide. And that leads us to waste. So you put all of these chemicals on the soil, and then you have a large rain event, and all of that fertilizer washes off into the Mississippi watershed, most often in the Midwest, and it is an enormous watershed, which funnels down into the Gulf of Mexico and creates the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. And as a matter of fact, just a couple of weeks ago, NOAA released a report that the dead zone this year in the Gulf is the largest ever at 8,776 square miles. So the students didn't quite understand how that affected them until we start talking about prices and the economic impacts and the social impacts of that on the business people along the coast. So you could see them starting to understand how all of this ties together. Next slide. And then another form of waste, which is the how our food supply is leading to obesity-related diseases through diet and our sedentary lifestyle. So we're looking at diabetes, heart disease, stroke, some cancers, and then we can talk about more those are the social impacts, the high cost of prescription drugs, and then the cost of medical care, especially emergency medical care. And we all know that healthcare, affordable healthcare is an enormous issue right now, but it is very, very costly. Next slide. And then the third aspect of waste is all of the choices we have in our supermarket. And we could talk about the packaging and the transportation of all of those types of food to all those choices to our supermarket. And then that takes us back to the processed food and the health implications. And then whatever we don't eat goes to the landfill and also goes to a litter problem. You see that all the time when people finish with something and they just leave it where they finish it. And then, of course, the garbage patch. I believe we now have 6 garbage patches on the planet. Next slide. So once we've done this presentation, then we take our students outside and we let them see food, how it's grown. We pull some food, we let them taste it. This is our Slow Food Community Garden that was built in 2014. And it is 40 beds that are for rent to our students, faculty, and staff. We provide the water, we provide the soil, and the tools. And all the gardeners have to do is bring their own seeds, and they get to keep whatever they grow, and they have a beautiful gazebo that they can rest in. Next slide. So this was the very first thing that popped up the day, a few days after the very first planting when it was opened. Next slide. And then this is just a couple of the beds. So we opened it in August. It's not the best time of year to open a garden, but just within a few weeks, we already had amazing things growing. Next slide. And we don't get snow very often in North Texas, but this is a picture that one of the gardeners sent me when it did snow a couple of years ago. It was 2 years ago. Next slide. So we've shown the students this is how food is grown normally, where you have to worry about weather extremes and drought and rainfall and all the pollution that goes along with that. But we were lucky enough to get 2 grants to allow us to build an aquaponics lab in an existing greenhouse. They went in, cleaned out the greenhouse, redid all the wiring, put in water walls and fan systems, heaters, all new lighting, and we built 3 closed-loop aquaponic systems. This is our large system that was paid for with a STEM grant. That is a 500-gallon tank that currently, we will have catfish in it. We had that window sprung a leak a few weeks ago, and we just got it repaired. And so we will be putting that system back into use. But we had to move all the fish out until we could get it fixed and get the system up and running. But this is when the system was very first built. Next slide. And this is it from the other direction. So this is one closed loop system. And then those are the fish that we started out with. We started out with 100 goldfish. And the next slide, there are goldfish that we started out with, 100 of them. And next slide, this is the food that their waste fertilized. So an enormous amount of greens were grown that very first winter. Next slide. We also have 2 other units that were paid for with a separate grant where we had goldfish again. And this is actually one of the units that we hold workshops, and we teach people how to actually build one of these at their homes and give them lessons in a workbook on how they can do that. And then the next slide. And that's our triple unit. Again, 1 tank and then 3 growing beds. So it has been an amazing experience. We've had some ups and downs, but it gives students another aspect of how food is growing differently. So instead of growing it outside in the soil, you're growing it inside using rocks, water, and fish poop. And it's a lot of fun to take the students out there. It's all organic. A lot of it's heirloom, and we can just pick off leaves and just eat them right there because they are absolutely organic and clean. Next slide. And that back in 2015 when we got quite a bit of snow, we had 5 snow days, the garden outside, the community garden, was covered in snow. But I ran down and took this picture in the greenhouse about 15 minutes before they closed the college. So you can see all the sleet and snow, but all the food inside was just happy and warm, and it was actually the best place to be on the campus. Next slide. So in 2015, I worked with a group of students, college students and early college high school students, which are housed in the lower level of our college. And they were going through a program to earn their green cord upon graduation. And one of the things they had to do was attend workshops. And after I had done this presentation about the food and taken them outside into the aquaponics lab, they expressed an interest in learning more about food waste. So I contacted Stephen Sturdivant at the EPA Region 6 office, who came out and made a presentation to the students and explained to them what the problem is around food waste and why it's such a huge issue and some of the things that can be done. So they were really interested in knowing how they contribute to that problem. In our early college high school, it is part of our Dallas Independent School District. And on October 1st, 2013, DISD decided that it cost them less money to provide free breakfast and lunch to every single student in the district than to manage all the paperwork for the reduced and free lunch program. So every single day, every single student gets free lunch, free breakfast, and a free lunch, which was leading to a lot of waste. So they were recognizing that there was a problem, but they wanted to actually do an audit and measure what their impact was. So these are the students that conducted the audit 2 years ago. Next slide. So here they are, hard at work. They took the trays, they sorted it into 4 different containers, and then we stacked the plates. And that's a picture of the bread and then the vegetable containers. They also did audits. They asked the students as they were throwing stuff away, why did you throw this away? Well, I wasn't hungry, or I didn't like it, or they made me get this and I don't like that. And they actually did many hundred, I think it was like 200 plates. And then these 2 pictures are all of the food that was unopened that was left behind. So we diverted that into a separate container. So after the audit, the students were really wanting to divert that food that had been unopened. And the staff there in the early college high school cafeteria were all on board. And I was working with the Region 6 EPA office to set that up. And then the district pushed back and would not allow us to divert it. It said it was against their policy. So we are still trying to work through that problem, and I'm hoping that we can do that this next year. So this is the amount of food that was thrown away. We weighed it, so we had almost 27 pounds of fruit and vegetables, and we had 186 plates. So it was close to 200. And then the thing that was thrown away, or that was diverted the most, was applesauce, of all things. And I think the problem was it said it was no sugar added or sugar free, and so their perception was that, well, then it must not taste good. And so they just left that behind. Next slide. And then so after we did the audit, the students put together a presentation, and they presented their findings and what they learned through the process to their peers. Next slide. And these are all of the social media avenues that I manage here at Mountain View College, if you'd like to keep up with anything that we do. And then next slide. And that is my contact information. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lori. Now we have time for 1 or 2 burning questions. Do we have any questions for Lori?
What are the garbage patches you refer to, please? If you could give a definition, qualifying factors, and the locations of them, that would be great as well.
The locations of them, I was looking for a map. I believe that there are 4 in the Pacific Ocean, 1 in the Atlantic, and 1 in the Indian Ocean.
Okay. What do you use in your community garden to control bugs? The vegetables look beautiful.
It is completely organic. The gardeners sign a contract with my office when they rent a bed, and they are banned from using any kind of pesticides or herbicides. And we discovered that even if they try, the other gardeners will snitch on them.
Okay. I guess we should continue to the next presentation.
Excellent. We will now hear from Esau Millenthal. Mr. Millenthal was the executive chef at Hutto Independent School District in Texas for 3 years. Previously, he was the executive chef at other locations, including St. David's Hospital in Austin, Texas, and General Electric in Houston. Esau, I now turn the presentation over to you.
Hello. Sorry, I need to get this up. And how do I minimize this?
Minimize. You could use the orange arrow to minimize the panel.
Beautiful. Hi, I'm Esau. I was the executive chef at for Sodexo, executive chef for multiple hospitals, General Electric, Appliance Park, and for this, the executive chef of the Hutto School District for 3 years. It's a small school district in Texas, about 8 schools. There, I wanted to get into the sustainability where I was seeing a lot of waste and didn't know what to do about it. I contacted Steven Sturdivant of the EPA, and same one that Lucy used, and he came to the schools and did a big food waste audit with us. We did the elementary schools, one elementary school and one high school. This elementary school was a free and reduced, so that it was all free breakfast and free lunch. So it had our highest amount of attendance. We were able to get the older kids to not only separate all of the food, but to then ask questions afterwards. And it was a lot of fun. The kids had a lot of fun. They learned a lot from it, just doing it. And it was a great engagement for them with the younger kids up to their own age group, obviously. So Veterans Hill is where we did this food waste audit. We had the students divide the food, throw it away into categories. So we had multiple buckets, and they took a survey of their peers to find the reasons for the waste. Here's a picture of some of them. We found a lot of interesting results. Children at elementary schools are required to take a minimum of 4 ounces of fruit and or vegetables, but they're nearly throwing away that much. One elementary school in one day was creating 90 pounds of compostable waste. This, if you exploded it over all the elementary schools that we had, we're looking at roughly about 2,000 pounds a week of compostable waste created by just the 5 elementary schools. There's a lot of regulations of exactly how much food that you have to put on a tray for these schools. You have to give them a serving of fruit and or vegetable. You have to give them 2 grains. You have to give them 2 protein. And so it creates a thing where there's a certain amount that they have to take whether they want to or not. The amount of waste per child per order in ounces, and this is per the child that ordered it. So it says baked, that's the baked potato. So the kids that ordered the baked potato threw away the majority of their baked potato, 3.5 ounces. We also see on the compost, that's all the fruit and vegetable, the easily compostable items. Like I said, they had to take 4 ounces. They're throwing away 2.9 ounces. The ones who took the fish threw away 2.8. The ones who took the pizza threw away 0.9. And liquid, which is a 4-ounce container of milk, or 8-ounce container of milk, they're throwing away 3.1 ounces of it. We also had some really telling results from the interviews. This kid right here just got down low with every little kid just to get their attention. He was fantastic. The older kids did the interviews as the children came through and gave us our trays so that we could better understand. We gave them a simple questionnaire to ask them so that they could easily get the information. Our interview results showed, right here, you see on the right, the different colors relating to different things. We see a lot of full, that they were too full, and that's why they were throwing it away. We also see some don't like high in there, but we also see didn't want, and then some were gassy. So where to go from here? As you can see, we have a lot of full and don't like. The don't like is especially interesting because the kids choose everything they eat. So they come through the line, and while they are required to take a certain amount, they do choose from those items. As you can see from the trays, while they have to take one fruit or vegetable, we have 4 fruits on one tray, along with the entree and another side of potato. So you have 5 fruits and vegetables just on that one tray. And these are the kids who are throwing away all this food because they're full, or because they didn't want or don't like the food that they got. And in those questionnaires, it would be like, well, I don't like apples, but they did take an apple. So how do we attack this? So I created an action plan, and this was the same PowerPoint I used to present to our groups, our health group at the school, which then takes that to the school board to try to create some programs, some control points, and some action plans. Creating education piece for the teachers, a snapshot of what makes a plate, get buy-in from the principals. Use this opportunity to educate, not taking more than you can eat beyond requirements. What we found is that while the kids were asking the other kids, I was asking the teachers about how much they thought the kids needed to take. And they really didn't know. They were actually walking through telling kids, well, make sure to take that and that. Like, it was almost, they felt like the kids were supposed to take everything. The kids felt like they needed to fill every square on the tray. And this was creating that problem of just taking more food than they even wanted or needed. So we wanted to use this opportunity to educate on the slow, woe, and go, and pilot with one school that already has the buy-in from us, the Veterans Hill, and there was another elementary school that worked closely with me to implement that education to the kids. Contact a compost retrieval. So we're working on, before I left Huddle, we were working on creating a compost program at one school as a pilot program. And then, and I have the people that I left behind were checking with region representatives about programs, checking with the EPA about grants, and contacting a local community garden about compost needs. We actually took over the community garden and created one before I left for the kids, so that we would have a use for the compost. Contact farmers or petting zoo on adopting an animal with use of fruits. And this, I've heard other schools do. It's where they'll set aside a separate container, throw all the apples and the oranges and things like that, and then give that to a petting zoo, giving them free food. If you can get something out of it, that's great. If you can give it to a farmer that then donates, a suckling pig back for some big fun barbecue. But more than anything, it's just at least use it. So do a separate trash bin. educate them on how to use the trash bins to only throw the fruit in there and get the custodial staff, because there's always some in the cafeteria to stand by it and make sure they're throwing the right things away in the right places. Educate the students on not taking more than you can eat. This refers back to the education piece of the classrooms, but it's also about an education piece for the teachers. It also was a good thing to give to the workers to create some simple verbiage for the servers to use as education. It's fast-paced. There's no time to have a long conversation with these kids or to try to explain more than you have, but just some simple quotes really help. Like, you only have to take that orange, but you can have as much fruit and vegetables as you like as long as you'll eat it. Now, don't take that if you're just going to throw it away. My favorite, get food to feed you, not feed the trash can. And Shaq was the Student Health Advisory Council. And in my presentation, I talked to them about changing the recess times to before lunch. If kids expend all that energy and all that calories before lunch, then they have more of a likelihood to really get their full fill and then be more full throughout the day. All of our schools and a lot of schools across the nation will have the kids go to recess or go to lunch and then go to recess, thinking that, well, we need to power them up before they go. But they just don't eat as much. They haven't expended that kind of energy. And then they go to recess, they use up all that energy, and they're hungry by the end of the day, and they really didn't get as much to eat as they could have. And that is my beautiful melon flower that I did. There's also another piece to this that's not on this. There's and I'll go into the high school a little bit after this. It's certainly not as telling as the elementary school, but there is a piece to it of, we did not see anywhere near as much of the full at the high school, because the regulation is for the kids to take the required 2 grains, the required 2 protein, the required fruit, vegetable, but the same requirements go for the high school kids, the exact same. So we're feeding these elementary school kids the same as the high school kids. And what we're doing is we're creating a situation where we're feeding elementary school kids too much and we're feeding high school kids too little. So I know I've been working with Stephen about that. It creates a problem, and it's confusing. If we go here to the high school, we see, and we used ROTC with our volunteers at the high school and did a fantastic job. We see a lot more different items. There was 8 different stations with multiple different kinds of food. We see, so it's much more varied. On the throwaway, it's more spread out. We don't have as big of any single items. I see a lot of salad, pizza, and we did our interviews there too. What we did not see, like I said, was a lot of full. We see with the apples, bruised, sour, but full was short on the list. Some doesn't like. Once again, we still have the problem of, we are required to give them a fruit or vegetable whether they want it or not. You'll see a lot of kids leaving with an apple in their hand and immediately throwing it into the trash. One of the ways that we decided to attack that was just to spend the extra money and get better fruits, get more melons, more watermelon, versus going the cheapest route, which is the apple, which just wasn't entertaining them. Cookies is the great thing about this is we could use this as a way to show our staff some of the reasons why the kids were not only throwing away their food, but unhappy with them. The cookies, all the reasons were undercooked. We could bring that straight to the staff and say, we have a problem here with the undercooked. The fries, dry. no flavor. So we can bring that to them. Like, obviously we're overcooking the fries, so they're throwing away food, because of the quality, and quality we can control easily. Nachos, cold, nasty, meat tasted wrong, all things that we immediately attacked and changed the way we were doing things in order to get it fixed. Pizza, greasy, crispy. So once again, ways that we can take it to our staff. But once again, we're not seeing the full thing. We're seeing more of a quality thing, which so we can attack that. We did not see the quality thing so much on the elementary. We saw way more of the full. And this is just some of the pictures of how we did it. So just some easy Home Depot buckets, separating everything out. And we did a ton of Home Depot buckets. We went around, closed off all the trash cans, so that there was no way to throw trash away other than in our buckets and at our tables. Went around, told all the people what we were doing. Had some people stationed by the trash can to explain why they couldn't throw it away in the trash can. We probably had about 12 Home Depot buckets at each place with different labels to be able to separate out to, a micro level. You can see all of those. And that's where we close off the trash cans, do not use, and the signage to where they should go. And that's our sergeant, the ROCC. I will ask, we never did figure out a way to solve the liquid problem. If anybody has any ideas, I've thought of some different ones, and none of them seem to fit. A lot of milk, juice, drinks thrown away at the high school and at the elementary school level. And that's the end of my presentation. I would love to answer questions.
During you're interviewing the students, did you give them a set option list of reasons for not eating the items, or did you develop your results graph from reasons presented by the children themselves?
We developed the results from reasons presented by the children themselves. We didn't set up a specific question like a multiple choice or anything like that. We let them predict the answers.
Okay. Did you educate students on agriculture and valuing food more, such as knowing a farmer or growing their own food in a school garden?
Well, so we had a defunct community garden in the area. I galvanized the school district and got a lot of volunteers together, and we went and completely redid the community garden and started it anew, and using the compost from the schools to create the fertilizer for it, and then use that as an education piece where each elementary school went out one day a week for 1 hour to go work on the garden as a volunteer basis after school. And with 5 elementary schools, and we had all the days of the week covered.
Okay, and one more. Is it a nationwide requirement for schools, high school, middle, and elementary, to receive the same size portion, or is this a district policy?
No, it's the USDA requirement.
Okay.
Well,
with that, we should.
It's actually Texas Department of Agriculture requirement, but it's based on the USDA. The Texas can change it somewhat, but more than anything, they can increase those portions, not really decrease.
Okay. Thank you. All right, so we should move on to the next presentation.
Thank you so much. Our final speaker today is Melissa Terry. Ms. Terry is a mother, urban farmer, and food policy researcher at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Melissa is the Student Food Conservation Manager for the World Wildlife Fund, and she's the co-author of the Guide to Conducting Student Food Waste Audits, a resource for schools. You're up next, Melissa.
Great, thank you so much. So my presentation is about sort of some meta level thinking about how to change the conversation about food waste in schools, and thinking about it in terms of teaching towards food conservation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today, and how teaching about food conservation not only can help reduce food waste inside the school and improve food security, but it also helps in sort of a theory of change in growing healthy communities. So next slide. There we go. So in Arkansas, just as a case study, this is my home state, and the statistics behind childhood hunger and long-term health outcomes in our state are pretty intense as far as like pressing needs for change. So in Arkansas, we have the second or third, depending on what year it is, typically highest rate of childhood food insecurity. We also have about 29% of our children who live in poverty, and we also have a childhood obesity problem. And so what all those factors do when they're combined together is they create an ecosystem of dis-ease and unwellness. And so what we look to do in the school environment is not just to change the conversation about food conservation, but to also work with schools and nutrition directors and school district professionals to understand that the cafeteria space is not a restaurant, it's a classroom. And so we really want to teach towards better public health, better personal health, and making good food choices in that space. So next slide. So in looking at the food recovery hierarchy, the priority, of course, is source reduction. So what prevention strategies can be taken? Feed hungry people first, feed animals second. You know, in the school environment, we're going to just skip the industrial use, but then feed the soil third, and then of course the last option is landfilling. So in thinking about the source reduction piece of it, in order to know what you need to reduce, you have to measure it, because you can't manage what you don't measure. And that's where the food waste audits become relevant and a baseline for making nudges and behavioral changes and systemic changes. So next slide. So this is our setup in conducting a post-consumer student food waste audit. One of the reasons why we really emphasize the word student food waste audit, even though I just realized that it's not in this title up here, it's in the title of the national guide, because we want to emphasize that we're talking about behavioral changes among the students. And so, and how to use this space again as a classroom to help them make good choices and maybe make some changes in their food choices outside of the lunch classroom environment. So the first step is to do a food waste audit, which is what we did. In the top left-hand photo, you'll see our buckets out there, and our coalition of all the people involved. The faces in that picture represent our school principal, our nutrition, our cafeteria director, Stephen Sturdivant from Region 6, our district math coach, and so she really helped us plug into some of the STEM lesson planning, and that was really helpful and relevant because we were able to connect back to some classroom learning experiences that tied the lunchroom classroom back to the formal classroom space. So one of the things that I like about this picture, and then the reason I included it, is that excuse me, is that when we started doing our very first audit, I realized immediately that the liquid waste and the milk waste needed to be separated. So we stopped what we were doing And I just grabbed a Sharpie and created some new signage. So you see, we like spent a lot of time making these really professional and typed out and laminated signs, and then I could just grab a piece of paper and smack the new label on a couple of extra buckets. And the reason I did that is because we could see that the milk waste was, there was a lot of milk waste, and period, and we wanted to know more about that. So in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see one of the students who is recording the data. Again, we just weighed the buckets empty to get a chair weight, and then we weighed them with the items in there in between each of the different groups coming into the cafeteria. One of the things that came up earlier in the previous presentation was in the tricky problem of how to reduce liquid waste. And so I think it's important, just based on our observational field science, in understanding that the milk waste is a huge opportunity for reduction. So one of the things that we did at our school was we did a 5-day audit so that we could normalize across menu changes and see what kind of patterns stuck regardless of what was served. And the milk was a really big deal. And we were getting on average about 17 unopened milk cartons per day. And then also the ones that were opened but not consumed and then going into the buckets. So when we asked the students, like, why are you taking a milk if you don't want to drink it? And they thought that they had to. And come to find out, a lot of people think that you have to take milk, mostly because it's habit. And when people of, my generation, people who are, like 25 or older, I'm not 25, but people who are 25 or older, it was mandatory. But with the Healthy and Hunger-Free Kids Act of 2010, that changed because milk used to be considered a nutritional supplement as part of the lunch nutrition requirements. And with the Healthy and Hunger-Free Kids Act of 2010, all the nutritional requirements were relocated to what was actually on the plate. So milk is not mandatory in offer versus serve schools. It is still mandatory in schools that are not offer versus serve, but the trend is that offer versus serve is increasing exponentially. So that's the direction that USDA is encouraging schools to go. So if your school or your child's school or a school that you're working with is an offer versus serve school, they do not have to take a milk. And so that's important information. And the other thing that we asked the kids who were pouring their opened container milk into the bucket of like, why didn't you drink it? And they said that they thought they wanted it, but they were thirsty, but it wasn't what they really wanted. And so I was like, what do you want? What would you like to have instead? And the simplest answer sometimes really just is the simple things. They just wanted some water. So we went to our district and asked if we could do an experiment and get some 8-ounce reusable restaurant grade plastic cups, which are pictured in the upper right-hand corner. And so we put these cups in, put signage at the milk cooler that said you don't have to take a milk if you don't want one. You may take water. You may take a cup for water instead. So we had somebody stationed at the water fountain, which you can see pictured right behind the students in the picture on the right, and just kind of facilitated that change in flow for the first week and then let it continue. And then 3 weeks later, we went back and did an audit for 5 days and followed the exact same protocols as the first audit. And what we found is that just by having the water cups in the cafeteria as an option, that our milk waste was reduced by 21%. So what that comes down to is that there are ways to affect change just through behavioral economics. And if you're not familiar with some of the language around the school lunchroom and what that means, Cornell has a really great program called the BIN Center, and it's Behavioral Economics and Nutrition. And so they have a whole checklist called the Smarter Lunchroom Movement, and you can go through this checklist and look for some opportunities within the cafeteria lunchroom environment and see if there are some behavioral economic changes that you can make as well. Next slide. So just to condense and reflect on what all the information was in that slide, milk is optional, not mandatory in offer versus served schools. Milk waste is easy to reduce by simply offering a reusable, washable 8-ounce cup for the students to fill at the water fountain. At our school at Washington Elementary, we introduced the water cups and reduced our milk waste by approximately 21%. The nutritional aspect of high milk waste indicates that your students are leaving the lunchroom dehydrated. And a quick literature review of the connections between hydrated brains and learning outcomes will confirm that a high priority for when the students are in the lunchroom space is that they also need to be getting hydrated. So an 8-ounce glass of water or the milk is awesome either way, but if they're not going to drink the milk, then we really need to encourage them to have a cup of water. Next slide. So in our food waste audit, we found, as I mentioned, a lot of unopened containers. You'll see the apples that previous presenters have talked about, the unopened milk, etc. And so what we set out to do is to create a share table for unopened items so that students can share the items that they thought that they wanted, but then they changed their mind, or like the previous presenter, they got full, so that there was another place for that food to go. So because if we don't allow our students to have a share table space, then we're basically teaching them that it's okay to throw away food. And so that's the opposite of a positive education message. And so we're teaching them either by attrition or by intention. And what we want to do is, again, teach towards a food conservation ethic that builds respect for the energy and time and labor and transportation involved in getting that food to the school, especially milk, which has an enormous carbon and methane footprint. So with the apples, one of the things that we observed is that especially in the elementary environment, one of the reasons why students weren't eating the whole apples is because they're little kids and their teeth are falling out of their head. And so they can't really bite into a whole apple. And so one of the remedies for that, we asked if we could cut the apples up, or at least in half, so that they could get a better chomp on it. And that helped a lot. There's some confusion about share tables across the country. We have found that different states have different policies, different counties within different states have different policies. So that is something to be considered. And if your state prohibits allowing a share table, there are some options that you could take. Next slide. So getting into the weeds a little bit about share tables, what are the rules? This PowerPoint presentation will be available after we conclude. And so I put this slide in here so that you guys could go visit this page. The Further with Food website is an interagency digital library of food resources for any practitioners, parents, researchers, school district officials, nutrition directors, etc. And Further with Food is a combined partnership between the EPA and the USDA to create a place where both agencies' policies can intersect and live in the same place. And so the website is there, and if you go to that website and click on search and type in share tables, I just published a legal guide to share tables with my colleague from the Arkansas Food Law Program that lays out some of the best management practices with share tables and some of the legal guides within that, and then how to work with your elected officials if it's currently prohibited, but you would like to change it. So, next slide. Food recovery in the K-12 environment. One of the things that we like to talk about at our school is how to create a closed loop food system, which is why the share tables piece of it is important. We want to create as many touch points with the food that has been provided by the American taxpayers as much as possible. So what I mean by that is that in having a share table, that's another touch point for another student to be able to access that food. At the end of the lunch, we have a volunteer, one of the students on our green team, takes the contents of the whatever items are remaining in the share table container down to a refrigerator in the kindergarten wing of our building. And so they're immediately moved to the refrigerator, and then all the teachers know that they have access to that refrigerator throughout the day and in the afternoon if some of their kids that they know are food insecure are bonking and are really having a hard time focusing, that they can go in there and grab them, you know, a cheese stick or a pack of carrots or a milk or whatever it is. And then we also use the items that don't get used by the teachers in the afternoon in our after school programs. So we expand the bandwidth of the food that's served at the lunchtime to 3 additional touch points. And that's one of the ways. And then every Friday, whatever's left in the refrigerator, we put in the backpacks for the kids that our school counselor has identified as food insecure, except for the milk. Don't ever send the milk home in a backpack because you never know what's going to happen. But typically on the Friday, we'll just bring out all the milks, and the kids in our after-school programs will drink those. So this slide that you're looking at now is kind of a reverse food recovery program that we have. We have a school garden, and we grow food that when we have extra goes into our cafeteria. Last year, we grew a bunch of black-eyed peas that our cafeteria director cooked for all the students. They were super proud. We've grown basil that's been used in their pasta sauce, etc. But we also partner with a local grocer. In our case, it's a store called Natural Grocers. And we partner with them to do food recovery for their surplus from their produce aisle. And we bring it to our school every Tuesday and Thursday for an after-school healthy snacks and school garden program. So the behavioral science indicates that kids need somewhere between 7 and 11 invitations to try is how it's classified before they'll self-select healthy choices. And so our goal is to keep healthy food and fresh food in front of the kids at all points, but then to also really talk about, like, look, here's food conservation in another realm that's coming to you and benefiting your whole school. So like in the picture in the bottom right-hand corner, that's a picture of, you know, some older bananas that might have been tossed out. And so we made smoothies with them. And so we just talk about how to extend the life of food. So it looks like I've only got a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to advance pretty quickly. Next slide. This, the food waste, reducing food waste, is a publication of the USDA. It has some of those behavioral economics links in there as far as like the recess changes, et cetera, that was previously mentioned. If you'd like to see the full-size version of this, you can click on the link below after the presentation. Next slide.
Melissa, don't feel rushed. We have plenty of time.
Oh, really? Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right, so next slide, please. So we have partnered the USDA and my co-author on the USDA side. And just to back up just a minute, the reason that we did the student food waste audit guide in the first place is that in doing the research in school food policy, I first reached out to the USDA because, you know, the cafeteria is really the regulatory domain of the USDA. And so when I reached out and asked, like, we want to do a student food waste audit, what are the protocols? And they were like, well, a good question. Maybe you should ask the EPA. And so I reached out to the EPA. Oh, there's my timer. I reached out to the EPA and asked them the same thing. And they're like, well, that's a good question. Maybe you should ask the USDA. And I was like, wait a minute. So it's a really interesting public policy space in the school cafeteria, because while it's true that the USDA has the regulatory authority over everything pretty much inside the cafeteria, the second that a bag of food waste or trash or solid waste of any kind crosses the threshold and heads on its way out to the dumpster, then that's the regulatory domain of the EPA. So what we realized is that both agencies have a vested interest in reducing the amount of waste that's going out that door. And so together, myself and my two co-authors, Stephen Sturdivant from the EPA and Jimmy Nguyen from the USDA, got together and spent a year working on writing the Student Food Waste Audit Guide. Then Jimmy at the USDA partnered with the National Institute of Medicine and created this 7 steps of a school food waste audit. Just a quick, demo of like how to look at it. And so you can also, when you come into this PowerPoint, you can also go into the links provided in this infographic, and then you can see like a full blog post from Jimmy at USDA about kind of their perspective on why this partnership makes a lot of sense and is helping both agencies kind of hit their goals in a really combined way. So next slide. So just to review, so what are the barriers to food conservation in the K-12 environment, and even K-16 to some extent? So again, there's confusion regarding mandatory milk. So there's a link to the actual regulatory statute underneath that you can click on. There's confusion regarding reservicing, which is the USDA's term for unopened milks, fruits, and packaged items. The link provided below that is also takes you to the regulatory statute, and it's also covered more fully in the legal guide to share tables that I mentioned earlier. There's confusion regarding the impacts of behavioral economics on choice, and this link will take you to the Ben Center at Cornell that I mentioned earlier. And there's also confusion about the recognition that the school cafeteria is a learning environment. And again, that just speaks to that every other room in the school building is considered a learning environment. And so if we expand our thinking a little bit and include the cafeteria in that, then we have one of the biggest classrooms in the whole school building. So next slide. What are our tools for food recovery and donations? So you'll find that there are a lot of concerns, and rightly so, about the legality of food recovery and how to advance that inside of a school, and then also even outside of a school. Like if you're at an event and they have extra food, like what are your options? So the University of Arkansas's Food Law Program created a legal guide to food recovery that's super helpful. It really breaks it down into layman's terms of what does that mean, how are we protected, how are we at risk. The Good Samaritan Act, the Bill Emerson Act, provides clear language, which was passed by Congress, provides clear language of protection for food recovery donations. And so in their research, the University of Arkansas food law scholars found that there are no incidents on record where anyone has been sued for a food recovery and food donations. So obviously, if you're following best management practices and you have food handling protocol, then you're going to be fine. There's also the federal enhanced tax deduction for food donation, a legal guide. And this talks about like if you want to work with a store to bring in additional produce or donations into your school environment, that this is an opportunity to talk with the retailer or whoever the donor is about how to calculate a financial incentive beyond the social incentive. And so what I mean by that is that, like, if you have a store that donates a banana that they bought for $0.25 but they sell for $1, then they can claim the 75 cents in between those spaces as a enhanced tax deduction. So that's an opportunity to really make a business case for it, as well if you want to create external food partnerships. The USDA's Office of the Chief Economist has guidelines for food recovery and donations. The EPA, similarly, in talking about we want to feed people first, animals second, and the soil third. The USDA's Access to Healthy Foods, there's some really good background information in the hyperlink provided below that as well. Next slide. So this is my contact information. These are our kids who are cheering with their water cups. They really like it, and we see our kids. This is our second full year to have the water cups in our school. And the funniest story that I have to tell about the water cups is that we have reusable trays that you can see kind of in the corner of that picture. And when we first started using them, one of the kindergartners, I was helping at the water fountain, and one of the kindergartners came up to me and was like, "Hey, Miss Melissa, come watch this." And I was like, "Okay." So I went to their table, and she picked up her cup off the table and she put it on her tray. And she's like, "Did you see that?" And I was like, "Can you do that again?" So she took it off, and then she put it on, and she was like, "Don't you see the circle on my tray? That's what the circle is for this cup." And I was like, "Of course, that's exactly what that circle is for. We kind of just forgot for a minute." And so sometimes the simplest things we forget because, just by overthinking it sometimes or whatever, but a simple cup of water was magic to a kindergartner. And now these kids are growing up and coming up through the school, knowing that it's important to get hydrated through your meal. Additionally, all the schools in our district, we have 9 elementary schools, and so what was piloted at this school is now expanded to all the schools in our district. So including the middle schools, not just the elementary schools, the middle schools and the high schools. So these pilot programs that you can start in your own lunchroom are opportunities to do like what urban planners would call tactical urbanism, but what we would call creating some nudge spaces to see how practical it is to implement certain changes. And starting with one school at a time we found it to be a really helpful approach. But then also going way up to the 50,000 foot view of looking at what policy changes can we make and what guidance documents can we provide that will enable, facilitate, and empower our local partners to feel confident and comfortable in trying some of these nudge changes. So this is my contact information on this slide. I have been working as a consultant with the World Wildlife Fund and implementing, we wanted to expand over this past year, our student food waste audit guides past 1 or 2 schools, and our goal was to work with 100 schools across the country. And so we've been doing that this past year, and we'll be doing some additional work and some publishing some toolkits, hopefully within the next year, that will publish some of those findings, but then also provide a comprehensive tool for folks who want to make these changes. This is my contact information. The one thing that I realized that I did not put on here is my email address. If you want to email me, my email address is long and awkward, so I'll say it slowly. It's M as in Melissa, ATMAT023 at email.uark.edu. So that's MAT023 at email.uark.edu, and I'm very happy to help anybody who has further questions in whatever way. I put my Twitter handle on here so that you guys, if you're interested, we actually did a live recording of a food waste audit with a middle school in our district. Our green team kids got so pumped about doing it that when we did the one audit, they were like, no, we want to do it every Friday. And so we're like, all right. And then we started doing it, and by about the fourth Friday, they were like, let's make a video. So we did. So we did a live broadcast. A middle schooler was holding the camera, so the production quality is about what you'd expect. But it's really funny, and it shows that it can be like informal, but also a really great way to promote STEM-based learning. And field science doesn't always have to be outside. It can be in the classroom environment of your cafeteria as well. So we used a lot of things like decision trees and weights and measures and creative graphs and all those things that circle back into STEM-based learning. So if you want to see that video, we live streamed it at the time, but of course it's archived on at my Twitter handle at Melissa A. Terry. So with that, I'll stop talking and open it up. And if you guys have any questions, and again, this PowerPoint presentation is going to be available to y'all after the broadcast concludes. And please do dive into any of these links that you're interested in. And if you still have questions, I'm more than happy to help you.
All right, thank you, Melissa. You can actually download the presentation right now. In your panel, if you go to the handout panel, you'll find the presentations there, and you could download them while the webinar is live. And with that.
Awesome, thank you. And one more point that I wanted to make, I'm sorry, just to circle back to the question about the very first presenter about the litter in the oceans. Like, there's an organization, if you want to know more about that, it's called 5 Gyres, the numeral 5, GYRES.org. And you can learn all kinds of stuff in there, and how, again, source prevention is probably the greatest tool that we have. So, thank you.
Okay, it appears that this was only done in one school district in Arkansas, correct? Are there plans to expand this to the entire state?
We actually did. We started with one school in our district, and then we actually, after the first audit at my school, which is in the Fayetteville School District, I actually reached out to the county environmental affairs office, and we replicated the audit in 4 other schools, and we picked a very rural school, another urban school in another school district, and a semi-urban school, and then a semi-rural school. So we wanted to see if demographic changes affected the food waste results and the share table results. That's a whole nother study to present on, but so we actually touched about 5 school districts in our first year, and then in this past year, in working with the World Wildlife Fund, we actually reached out and hit about 100 schools across the country.
Okay. Did you instruct staff, students, or develop training resources for the other 8 schools that did not participate in the pilot?
Yes, so that was the whole point of doing this, the research and the publication of a student food waste audit guide, is so that there would be a really clear roadmap of how to, the why, the how, the what, and then the then what piece of it. So if you download the student food waste audit guide itself, there's a good section of background information on to some of the policy pieces of it, but then it gets down to the nitty gritty, and like, this is what you need, these are the materials you need, this is how you do it, here's some different ways to facilitate the process, etc.
Okay, thank you. Just bear with me one second. Okay, this is more of a generic question. For each audit, did you collect the trays and sort the uneaten food, or do you allow each student to sort their own tray?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we did a little bit of both. We asked the kindergartners to leave their trays on their table just because, you know, bless them. That's a lot to do. So we did facilitate the kindergartners themselves, but then the other grade levels, we had them come, you know, walk up to the disposal area and we had our green team students behind the buckets, behind the line that were helping, and then the actual students with trays walked in a procession past each of the buckets and put the items in the right bucket. And then a share table also.
Okay. This was a question about interviewing the students. Did you interview the students when they came to throw out their food, or was it done separately?
That's a good question, and it depends on the age group, really. About my personal observation and reflection is that the elementary lunchroom is really, the time is really tightly regulated, and order is something that is prioritized. And so the nutrition directors and cafeteria staff don't want a bunch of dilly-dallying around the disposal line. And so we did interviews with the elementary students after the fact when we went into the classroom, so the classroom piece of it. And that is the curriculum that we used for that was the My Plate curriculum that's also available from USDA. So we circled back in the classroom with the kids about a week after the audit, and then that's when we elicited their responses. But I know that folks who have focused more on the high school environment have done the interviews right then. So because the structure loosens greatly as you move from elementary to middle school to junior high and high school, and by the time you're in high school, it actually is more cafe-like than cafeteria-like, lunchroom-like. And so I think you just have to really observe your audience and take the advice of your cafeteria manager and nutrition director on what they recommend.
Okay. Can you elaborate on the differences they saw related to food waste in different demographics?
Well, the milk waste was about the same. We found that the kids in the rural areas did not waste as much food. And again, like I said, that's a whole nother research project in and of itself of like the cause and I think we don't want to make too many leaps in thinking about why that is, other than, I grew up in the country myself, and I grew up on a farm, and so it was just one of those things, like we wouldn't even thought about wasting food because we knew how much effort went into it. And so maybe it's a lifestyle thing, maybe it's a kids are hungrier thing. That is definitely a really good question that we can tease out in another project.
Okay. This is a question for Lori. It says, you mentioned that after the audit, the students presented their data to their peers. How was this organized, and who exactly did they present to? Did they present to the faculty or the administration at all?
I set up the location and had our media department set up all of the computer and the microphone and things that they needed, and they actually presented to high school students and college students. There are about 30 students in attendance.
Okay. Let's see. What is your, I guess this could be for anyone, what is your strategy for changing school policy for being able to redirect unused food in the cafeteria?
I can start tackling with that, but then, the other speakers might have something better to add. I would first just find out if it's allowed in your county/state, and a good place to start is with your county public health official, whoever that is, Department of Health, whatever they call it in your area. And if they're like, share what, and they don't know, then that's when it's really good to have this legal guide to share tables already kind of in your hand so that you can walk through some of those things. And because a lot of times, you know, this domain is a very risk-averse environment for good reason. And I think for a lot of practitioners, no is the safest answer, you know, and it just is. And so, like, part of our job as public policy folks and researchers is to provide enough accurate information to assuage those concerns in a manner that is forward-facing and supportive, and says, like, we totally understand where you're coming from. Here's some other things to consider. So that would be my recommendation, is to start with your cafeteria director in the school that you want to work with, and then move up to the nutrition director, or if you want to do multiple schools in a district, start with the nutrition director and then check with your county health official.
Okay, thank you. This question is for Esau. In one of your graphs, one of the results were that students felt rushed. Did the school system change its timing with regard to recess, for example, recess before lunch?
We were in the works of that at the end. I'm not there anymore. I do believe that they brought it to the school board, and I don't know what the results of that was. But I think it's important to bring for anybody who is in that area, to bring that option to their school board with the information that the EPA brings. Now, being rushed in that's a hard one, because they just only have so much time to give these kids, about 30 minutes per lunch.
Okay, thank you. This is a question for everyone. Has there been any kind of study of whether communication with students impacts food waste?
Can you say it again? I'm sorry.
Okay, has there been any kind of study of whether communication with students impacts food waste?
Yes, and you'll find those that research at the Ben Center at Cornell, and that gets into talking about, you know, one of the behavioral economics changes that can happen is providing good signage in your cafeteria, and etc. I cannot speak highly enough about this resource because it's just they're very grounded in research and methodology, but then they've also created some really good tools for lay people who are not policy wonks to be able to interpret and use, like, in real life.
Okay, that seems to be about it for questions.
This is Christina from EPA. Jorge, I sent the link to the guide conducting student food waste audits in the questions. I don't know if there's a way we can maybe get that link somewhere for folks.
You could use the chat option to send out that link.
Okay.
Okay.
I will try.
I'll do that right now.
Oh, thank you, Jorge. I really would like to thank all of our speakers for sharing their experience with the school waste audit guide. I know I personally learned a lot. I hope everybody on the call did as well, and have some good action items and ideas to take away with them. Finally, most of all, we thank you for joining this month's SMM Web Academy, and hope you continue to join us on future webinars. It's you that this program is designed for, so make sure you complete our evaluation and give us feedback on how we can meet your needs. We'll post the webinar audio in about 2 weeks. You have the handouts. The slides will be posted next week. Please join us for next month's webinar and look for an email with the details very soon. This concludes our session. Thank you, everyone.